All right. Welcome to the Ultra High Net Worth Clients Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Broadhead. We started this podcast as a way to create a central resource of the best fee only financial planner practice growing tips shared by the most outstanding fee only financial planners in the industry, of which our guest today is definitely one. These outstanding fee only financial planners agree to be on the show and provide a ton of value for free, all in the hopes that our audience might learn from their words. My father was a financial advisor, and financial advisors are the main clients we serve. So, my marketing agency's mission is to help every advisor grow their business in an effort to help the world become more financially secure. Today, we have the rare pleasure of talking with an incredible fee only financial planner, Lindsay. Lauren, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. My name is Lindsay. I'm a fee-only financial planner. I have been a CFP since 2001, and I work with clients all over the world. I have been working virtually since 2008, and my focus is comprehensive financial planning and investment management for my clients. I do work a lot with women, and not exclusively, but my firm is majority women owned and operated, and that is something that's important to me in my mission as a financial planner.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. Um, so yeah, definitely want to dig into, how you, um, knew to become virtual before it was cool. But before we dive into that, I like to start at the start. How did you get involved in this wild world of finance?
Well, it's funny because we hadn't talked about this before, but my mom is also a financial planner. She's
Yeah.
retired.
Hmm.
She still does work for people who need her help on a pro bono basis, but that isn't actually related to how I got into the business. I was an English major and a high school English teacher, and I taught predominantly overseas and moved back to the United States. And after a year of teaching in the US, kind of really didn't love it. And so started
Mm.
looking for jobs elsewhere. And the job I got hired for was to answer the phones. I was 28 years old at Putnam Investments in Boston, and it was for their 401k plan. So I jumped in. It was the first job I'd had that didn't have a lot of take home work. I would go home at 5 o'clock and not have to grade papers and do lesson plans and things like that. And one of the benefits that they offered was they were very willing to train us and give us additional credentials. So through Putnam, I got my six, my 63, my seven, my insurance licenses, and then eventually started my CFP all through them. And it was a very supportive program in that whenever you got another credential, you got a spot bonus and then a raise. So there was a lot of financial incentives to do that. I then also ended up winning a sales pitch competition that Putnam had, which everybody was a little bit surprised about. But once I started planning for it, I realized that doing a sales pitch is a lot like teaching a very, very short lesson, which with a much more willing audience. And so once that happened, I started actually traveling all over the country for Putnam doing 401k education seminars, and then
Mm.
ended up working in HR for the 401k plan and the executive deferred compensation plans at Putnam. So that gave me a really great background in educating and kind of, different arenas to get involved in. And it was a very, very good fit. So simultaneous to that, my mom was practicing on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, but going up to Boston an awful lot. So again, with the education background, she was also a former teacher. She would do a lot of seminars for employee assistance programs. So she would go into a company hired by the HR department to talk about benefits or estate planning or insurance coverage. So we had a whole library of programs that we delivered, and she decided that she got a little bit tired running up to Boston, so asked if I could take that piece over. And it was basically a paid marketing gig. So I built a whole practice in Boston based off of the people that came to my seminars and then decided they wanted to work with a fee only planner. So,
Hmm. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. We've had a number of other advisors on this show who were previously teachers, and that seems like a one of the best secret powers you can have, superpowers you can have for this industry. So that's really incredible. Can you talk about um, the key to a great presentation that connects, that engages, that inspires your audience to want to work with you?
Sure. Most teachers know that a lot of people are either auditory or visual learners. So making
Hmm.
sure that you're engaging on both parts. So I would do, well, actually, back in the day when we started, there wasn't PowerPoint. So we would do the overhead slides. Kind of, this was in the late 90s we were doing this. And so
Cool.
it was, overhead projectors like you'd have in school, but we always had a visual. So
Hmm.
I do think that for me, if I think about my best teachers, enthusiasm for the topic, it's contagious, right? So I am still to this day, fortunately, very, very passionate about what I do, and I love what I do. And I love educating. I love empowering people to understand the decisions and to feel confident in making those decisions. So I think that was one thing. Um, Also, audience engagement. We would do handouts and we would have them do activities. So it wasn't just an hour-long lecture. And the other thing that we would do, and this was again from teaching bribery. So whenever somebody would ask a question or answer a question, they would get a Hershey Kiss. So my
Oh.
mom is kind of famous for this because she would do, national conferences and be giving out Hershey Kisses to, dentists or something like that. But so people, knew that we were the Hershey Kiss ladies. And so I still do that. That's still part of my presentations when I teach now. And so I think it's really, making the topic accessible and also, getting people excited about it, which, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, money is so boring. Well, it's like your health, right? It's one of the topics that you do have to understand, you do have to be engaged. Even when you have a professional, you have to know enough to know that what's being recommended to you is in your best interest. And so I think it's a really fantastic job for that reason, because you really do feel like you're changing people's lives and helping them achieve their goals. And I would say, you know, at least probably once a week, I get a note or something from someone saying, gosh, thank you for helping me through this or explaining this to me or something. And I do think it's a fantastic career for that reason.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. You're enthusiastic about the topic, and that is um that transmits to everyone in the audience. I love the exercises, getting the audience to, I guess, take out a sheet of paper and do something on their own. Are there specific exercises that you like to employ?
But yeah, I have worksheets, as
Yeah.
you might expect. So the goals worksheet is a big one. And I go back and forth on this because I don't like to dictate goals to clients. I've
Hmm.
gone away from using the term retirement and kind of moved a lot towards financial independence,
Hmm.
because I think there are people, especially business owners, who don't want to retire necessarily, but would like to know that they could if they had to, or if medical necessity, made it crucial to do so. So I have two versions of those worksheets. I have sort of a free form fill in the blank one that's financial goals, personal goals, and challenges or things that keep you up at night. And then I also have kind of
Hmm.
tick boxes, and they're exercises for both parties if someone's in a financial relationship, so that you can also see, are you on the same page? Are you wildly divergent? What do we need to do to make sure that everybody's together? One of the things that I love to do as well is I call it the ones, twos, and threes. So we have an income management worksheet, and people hate the word budget. It's like diet. Don't make me do something I don't want to do. But an awareness of spending to me is really the critical piece of having success in a financial plan. Investment returns are great, but I do really feel like living beneath your means and having a good savings habit established is probably one of the most critical pieces. So what I do with that is I give them a blank income management worksheet, and we talk about the things that you'd have total control over, some control over, and no control over with your spending. So an
Mm,
example of no control would be taxes. The government says you owe this much and you pay. Are there ways to finesse that? Sure, you contribute to retirement plans and things like that. So I would even argue that for some people that's a some control, but that's a good example of, something that you have to hand money over to. A two example would be groceries, for example. I can go to, a very high-end grocery store with my shopping list, or I can go to a very inexpensive, cut rate with coupons on the double deal day and spend, vastly different amounts of money on the same list. And then a three is something you have total control over. And people hate when I say this, but vacations are an example of that. We all learned during COVID that a staycation is a thing and it's possible. And kind of to that point, I had a lot of people who had tremendous savings surplus during COVID because they weren't traveling and they weren't eating out. And I would say those are the two things that people, don't feel like they have control over. Sometimes it's due to convenience or planning. Um, and I don't want to ever take anybody's joy away. I think it's really important to have that. It's sort of like, again, with the diet analogy, if you get, put on a diet and told you can never eat anything delicious ever again, your diet's not going to last very long. But to help them set an amount. So, say eating out is $500 a month. Well, then let's talk about what's going to bring you joy. Is it going to be, a couple very nice meals, or is it going to be, every other day you get to go to Starbucks? What's going to bring you the happiness in life? So having people take back control of their spending, and I think that worksheet can be very empowering, has been a really good tool. I would say after, the estate planning conversation, the spending conversation is probably the most challenging for most of my clients.
hmm Yeah, yeah, that's tough, and it sounds like you really get into the weeds with your clients. You're almost getting towards life coach or area. It sounds like.
I don't know about life coach necessarily, but I do think that if you're a comprehensive financial planner, it is your job to really look at the minutia. For example, one of the things we talk about is deductibles on insurance policies. And a lot of people don't even know what their deductibles are. And we talk
Hmm
about, well, if you have a higher deductible, you have a lower premium and things like that. Um, I recently did a benefits review with a couple, and the husband had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And it was actually really lovely because he had everything buttoned up, and she actually didn't know that they had as much life insurance as they did. And it
Mm,
was it was really emotional because she said, "Oh, we're going to be okay." And I said, "Yeah." And that's the sort of thing where I have people who will say, "Well, isn't this common sense? Shouldn't you know how to look at these things?" No, not when you're in the throes of life, and especially if you're dealing with a very ill spouse and raising young children and things like that. And there's also a whole section of the population who didn't grow up with people who talked about money. For some households, money is a very, very taboo topic. I was the opposite. My husband was the opposite. Um, but there are plenty of people who say, I'm very intelligent. They have, doctorates and all this sort of stuff. But this wasn't anything that we grew up discussing in my house. It wasn't an appropriate
hmm
subject. And so I never learned. And I do think it's great that schools are now doing a better job of putting in educational pieces, but you can only go so far. It really does have to be something where someone is meeting you at your level and helping you. But it is
hmm
important in a lot of these instances to really understand the minutia of the decisions. And that's definitely, I feel like, part of my job to help my clients to understand what matters in the various topics that we discuss.
hmm And I think again that's where your background in teaching, really becomes a superpower because you can meet them at their level, talk in their language, just communicate in a way where they're like, "Thank you." Like now I feel safe.
Yeah. And the thing that
Mm,
was really interesting to me is coming into Putnam, being an English major, not a finance person or economics or anything like that. I used to do a project with my kids where they had to go observe a job, and they would have to make a glossary of terminology related to that job and things that somebody in that career would understand that maybe somebody in the wide world might not. And I realized very quickly that the financial services industry has a lot of those words and acronyms and almost misnomers. I remember being in one of those seminars and I have a woman saying, "So a growth fund doesn't necessarily grow?" And I said, "Not always." But what a great example, right? Because you kind of
Yeah.
go, "Oh, I'm going to get in a growth fund because that's going to make me money."
Hmm.
But there's a lot of things that don't make sense, necessarily in the context of the wide world. There's a pretty funny example that we've been talking about in one of my financial planning boards about the CFP, which in our world is the Certified Financial Planner designation. But if you are in the other SEC, the Southeastern Football Conference, the CFP is the football college football program. College
Yeah.
football, I can't remember anyway. Um, my husband will kill me because he's a huge college football fan. But anyway, it's been really funny because we both have this trademarked apparently. And so I was trying to figure out, when someone Googles CFP, you get a lot of football information as well. So, that's kind of understanding these acronyms. And I don't know that the industry deliberately did it to be exclusive, but for a lot of people, I think women especially, it can be very exclusionary language. So helping people to understand this is what that means. What's a 529 plan? What does it do? So, and there's a lot of tax codes involved in our job. And again, if you're not doing this all day long, you don't know what the difference is between a 401k and a 403b. So, that's where I feel like having a native guide, I think about traveling and hiring somebody who knows what they're looking at and understands the language. It really makes a big difference in your overall experience.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And for something this important, it's definitely, um, worth its weight in gold to get somebody that not only knows what they're talking about, but knows how to communicate it to you in a way that's easy for you to understand.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
that's awesome. Do you still do in-person seminars, online webinars, some version of
I do.
educational?
I do. I do a lot I don't do any that I get paid for, but I will do things for nonprofits. So,
Hmm.
for example, I will do planning for college finances for our local schools, and I do it in conjunction with another parent that I know who does the whole writing the essays and picking out the schools piece. So we do a webinar for parents on that. I actually teach at the Women's Institute in Houston. So I teach financial classes, and we had been targeting the group that comes usually is more older women and widows. And so I had done a lot of sort of, managing your finance on your own and talking about estate planning and things like that. Um, but the director decided that they were interested in trying something for a younger generation. So we're going to do something in the evening, which will be a live program about getting your financial house in order. And then afterwards adjourning to a local bar to continue the conversation for those people who can stay up past my bedtime. So,
Hmm.
doing kind of things that build community as well. I do presentations for my local women's club again, targeting women to get better understanding and better comfort level with their financial decisions. So, and for me, that has been a great community outreach. It also gives me credibility, and I do feel like it helps people to understand how I operate. So just like when I was doing this seminar, somebody would say, "Oh, you're great. I would love to work with you." Like if you know the teachers that you liked and the ones that you clicked with. So for me, it was a really great way to get in front of people and they could get a sense of, would we be a good fit? Would we be able to work together or not? So
Hmm. Awesome. And has that been the primary driver of growth for your business?
I would say it is. I would say probably other things that I do. I mean, I think community involvement in general has probably been my biggest driver. Um, getting involved in PTAs and local park boards and things like that, one of the things that I always do is I donate 2 hours of financial planning to school auctions or charity auctions. And that is great because I don't do hourly planning, and some people don't need, the full comprehensive plan. So it's a way for somebody who might not have access to my services to get it. By and large, those folks do end up becoming clients when the circumstances change. So that's been great for me. It doesn't cost me anything but my time. And again, it gives people a comfort level. Another way that has been really great to get the word out has been NAPFA, which is the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, has a marketing group where journalists, and it's, different journalists, different magazines, newspapers, things like that, will reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in talking with somebody about this. And so I was an English major, and my mother really, really wanted me to be a business major, and I didn't want to do that. But my English major has really come into play because I can usually send a pretty good several sentence summary that they can use in an article, or they can call me and, we do a follow-up, and that's happened a lot. So recently I was interviewed for a publication, and I said, well, how did you hear about me? Because it wasn't somebody that had come through NAP, it was a journalist that reached out to me directly. And he said, oh, well, I read something that you said in another publication, and you sounded pretty intelligent, so I decided to reach out. So that served me really well. And I also will say it gives me credibility for people who are looking for someone. And if they see you in a very well-known publication, they say, oh, she must know what she's talking about. And there are a lot of us who know what we're talking about. But in this day of Google searches and things like that, for some people, that does make a difference. You were quoted in the Wall Street Journal. That's amazing. Whatever. So I
Yeah.
think those things have happened. And like a lot of other people, word of mouth, just getting recommendations from people I know personally. Some of my clients are my friends. Many of my friends are not my clients, and that's understandable because it's a very personal journey, and a lot of people are not comfortable with, somebody knowing that level of their business. But I will say a lot of my friends have referred clients to me to say, I know how you work. I know how you care. This is someone that is important to me, and I think you would be a really good fit for them. And that to me is the biggest compliment, when somebody trusts, someone to you. So I do a really good job, hopefully, of making sure I've earned that trust and earned that recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. And you mentioned previously that you predominantly work with women.
Hmm.
And you also mentioned that, the best way to communicate is with passion and enthusiasm.
Hmm.
What topics or concerns are at the top of the list for this type of client that you're also the most passionate about, expanding awareness around?
Yeah, sure. I would say if you look at what money represents to most women, I'm going to speak in broad strokes. I I am the oldest of three girls. We are all successful professionals, and I was definitely raised by my mother to make my own financial decisions and own those. Um, but a lot of women aren't, but feel, they're in this situation where they need to understand more. So for a lot of women, money is safety. Having money means I'm going to be okay. And I would say probably the number one question when someone comes to me, especially if they're widowed or divorced, is, am I going to be okay? I work with a lot of women who are not partnered, and their question is also, am I going to be okay? What do I need to do to make sure that I am okay? So addressing that question, and I always start with what I would say, what keeps you up at night? What are the things that you're worried about? Because I really feel like I'm a worrier, so I empathize with that. And what are the things that we can put in place to take that worry away? Because there's lots of tools that we have. So I definitely, to your point, we talked about before, meet them where they are and address what their concerns are. I have a woman who is now 82, who I've been working with since 2006. And at that point, her husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And he did everything, managed all the money, all the investments. And she just said, I know what's coming and I know I need to learn this and I want to do it while he can still help and be around. And she did it. But it was a lot of, okay, what are you worried about? And so we said, I'm worried about not having money available, right? We have a huge emergency fund and bigger than she probably could ever need. Educating her about the fact that she has a lifetime pension, that income stream isn't going to stop when he passes away. And it actually has inflation adjustments. So it's actually going to go up. Worried about the fact that her dad lived into his late 90s. So we have long-term care insurance for her. So that's not a financial concern. So I basically kind of went through all her list, and our meetings now are literally, am I doing okay? Yes. And then whatever else she wants to talk about. And that's kind of where she wanted to get to. She didn't really want to have to go through the nitty-gritty of all the things, like having to redo all her estate documents after her husband did pass away. But she's been very responsive. And if she comes to the meeting and hasn't done something asked her to do, she owns it right away. But by and large, just going, you have enough cash. You have enough cash to buy the new car I keep telling you should get. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of people just want to know they're going to be okay with different levels of understanding. Will say I do work with couples, and in many of those relationships, the woman is the primary breadwinner and the primary financial decision maker, not exclusively. And this isn't anything that's happened by design. It just sort of seems to be who is attracted to me. So,
Mhm. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, what a wonderful niche to serve. What a wonderful type of client. You take them from the edge of the cliff to like, oh, I know, I'll just lay in this hammock now and be fine.
yeah, I mean, we're coming on 20 years, she and I together. So, it's definitely a process. But I feel like that's what I want for all my clients is peace of mind and feeling like, yeah, I can keep working or not keep working, or I know how much longer I have to keep working, or if I get a bonus, where do I need to put it to make sure that I'm keeping myself on track? But I think it's really important to have the client buy-in at the beginning and write down those goals, because then I can go back to them and say, okay, well, you told me that this was your number one goal. And instead, you're doing this. And so that's going to take you further away from that goal than closer to it. So tell me what's changed, or tell me if that's no longer your goal. And I can put it back on them. So it's not me saying, oh, you have to do this. It's you told me this is what you wanted. I'm just trying to keep you, in your lane and on track to meet that
Hmm.
goal. So that's worked well for me as well. I put everything in writing. I do written summaries. We have an online plan. And you talked a little bit about working virtually. So that what's great is it wasn't this easy in 2008. We had to, finagle things a little bit more. But the online plans are accessible by the clients in the location of their house. So I can do screen sharing, but they can also go in on their own time and look at things. And so that's been great. And, I can say, oh, I ran this report for you. I know you don't have time to look at it now, but I'm going to leave it in your portal, have a look at it when it, makes sense for your schedule. And that's really helpful because it allows me to work with these clients in these different time zones. I'm in Central and I have a new client who is in Malaysia, oil and
Whoa.
gas, overseas expat. So
Hmm.
we've been meeting either very early in the morning or kind of later at night. And it's been great because then, they send their things to me. I look at them before we meet. So I have flexibility and I can work with people that way as well.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, you mentioned at the top of our meeting, you've been virtual since 2008.
Great.
I left my job at NASA and started working remote in 2011, and I was like, I'm basically like a time traveler. I'm so
The
far ahead of the
forefront.
future. But you did it in 2008. How did you know that that was going to be the move and would be viable?
Oh, I didn't honestly. I was working for a firm in Louisiana and my husband got transferred to Houston. So the fabulous oil and gas story. And At the time, we were working with a coach named Angie Herbers, who is still in practice and does a lot of great things for her clients. And she was the one that said, well, what if we had Lauren continue on virtually? And I said, how's that going to work? And she said, we'll have to figure it out. So um, it was amazing because I said, especially I have these 70-year-old women and all that kind of stuff. So the couple of secrets to my success, one, I got a cell phone with a local phone number so they could call me and it wasn't a toll call. That was key. I continued to be very, very responsive on the phone and on email. I had they were able to go into the office in Louisiana and do a meeting like this with me. Or if they wanted to, we got them set up on Skype and they could do a meeting from their house with me because there wasn't really Zoom in these things. So it was mostly Skype, but we would give them Skype cameras if they wanted to. At the
Hmm.
beginning, I did go over for a week, a quarter, and I would meet with anybody that, needed to touch me and make sure I was still alive. And as we kind of got into it, that dwindled down because they're like, oh, it's a lot of traffic. I don't really feel like coming to the office. So I was like, okay, well, then I'm not coming over to Louisiana if y'all don't need me. So I would go back, if something happened, like if, a client's spouse passed away or things like that. But it was quite amazing. And we used Money Guide Pro. So clients could log in from home and look at Money Guide Pro. So I would say, click on this and you see what I'm seeing, and they would kind of follow along. And it worked and it was amazing. So I mean, we did do a little bit of handholding with the people who weren't as tech savvy because we still had people who, didn't have email and we were snail mailing them all of their forms because they weren't online. Um, but it ended up working really, really well, and I worked with them until 2019. So virtually.
Wow,
Yeah, so it
that's
was a it
that's
was a long
awesome.
stint. And then I was ready for COVID. So
Yeah, yeah,
I had an
yeah,
in-person job that changed to a not in-person job really quickly as soon as all the lockdowns went into place. And it was
yeah.
funny, they're like, oh, we're gonna have you work from home. And I'm like, yeah, I got this. I'm good at
You're
working
like,
from home. So,
you're like,
I mean, I
you're like,
do have, I have a printer and a scanner, in my house. So that's important. I have,
hmm
several monitors. That's important. But, it's really in my field, not hard to do this. And people appreciate the fact that, especially with traffic and time commitments that, if something happens, I can jump on for, 15-minute Google Meet and just we do a lot of screen sharing, click on this button, click on that button, enrollment for benefits and things like that. I don't want to execute something and do the wrong thing. So I'm happy to handhold as needed.
hmm Awesome, awesome. That's amazing. You're very adaptable and ready for your own industry changes and your clients. So that's amazing. Lauren, unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. I could definitely continue asking you questions for the rest of the afternoon, but I will respect your time. My final question for you is an open-ended question. You can take it in any direction that you like.
Okay.
And that question is, what are you working towards?
Ooh, I would say work-life balance, which is
Mm,
probably something that a lot of my clients struggle with. Um, Women, I think, tend to put a lot of other people first. So I am struggling to, in my day, schedule time for the things that keep me healthy because I really want to keep doing this job well into my 70s, which is what my mom did. And a lot of colleagues, have worked, well into their later years. Um, so I think for me, that's important. And just learning things that are going to continue to help my clients. So right now, I just did a micro credential with the Financial Transitionist Institute, and they work on helping people through big life changes. So things like that, there's a lot of learning opportunities out there. And so as a teacher, I also hope that I'm a lifelong learner. So those are also things that I'm working towards right now.
hmm Awesome. Well, everything you've shared, I'd say you were well on that path. So that's amazing. We'll be excited to keep watching you on your journey. Where can my audience find out more about you?
I am at beaconfinancialplanning.com. My email is lauren at bfpcc.com. And I'm happy to speak with anybody that is interested in learning more. So thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, no, this was my pleasure. Yeah, I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I mean, just the way you answered my question was I'm a visual learner with like a dash of auditory. Like I felt like I was hanging on every word. So you are a master communicator, my friend.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in and keep on growing out there, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.